Good afternoon. This is Alan Blumkin hosting all-time baseball history and trivia with my good friend David Nemec, author of many, many baseball books and the authority in the nation on the 19th century baseball. Today we're going to discuss the Hall of Fame. The results of the election were decided announced last night, and we got 3 new members of the Hall of Fame, which everybody in the listening audience probably knows: Tim Raines, Jeff Bagwell, and Ivan Rodriguez. So welcome, David.
Thank you, Al. It's a pleasure to be with you again.
Okay, so the results came in last night. In your opinion, were they fair? Were people that should have gotten in not voted in? Were people who voted in should not have been elected?
Well, I think we got in 2 cases. I do agree with the selection in Bagwell and Raines. Rodriguez is still unfortunately a suspect character. I don't know. People don't like to trust Jose Canseco and what he said about other abusers of steroids, but he's actually turned out over the years to be much more reliable than many other players who've testified adamantly that they didn't use, they don't know anyone who did use, and so forth and so on. And Canseco did pinpoint Rodriguez as an abuser, and in fact, said he injected him himself on at least one occasion. So I would have held off a little longer on Ivan. He definitely had a Hall of Fame caliber career, but was it a career that was produced in an honest fashion, or did he engage in steroid use? I think the question is still up in the air.
Okay. What did you think of the 2 that just missed, Trevor Hoffman and Vladimir Guerrero?
Hoffman, I think, is going to make it without too much trouble eventually, and probably Vladimir will make it too. I think they're marginal Hall of Famers in both cases, but with the way baseball is going now, the more players they can put in, the better the Hall of Fame seems to like it, and I think they're probably going to make it within the next. I would say even maybe next year one of them will make it, and probably both within the next 3 to 5 years.
Well, next year you have, for the first ballot, you have, among others, Chipper Jones, who probably will be a no-brainer, Omar Vizquel, and Jim Thome. And one of the things that's happening, basically, the Hall of Fame started having the induction ceremonies telecast in 1982 by ESPN. This is when Henry Aaron and Frank Robinson went in. And in order to get ratings for that program, you have to have live bodies.
Yeah,
so it was a couple of years ago when they put in Deacon White and Hank O'Day. I think Jacob Rupert was the third. The Yankee owner who established the Yankee franchise back in the 20s. You had no bodies, live bodies to induct, and the only ones that they had, I believe, were the broadcasters and writers who won those awards.
Yeah,
so, of course, that particular induction ceremony got almost had no viewing audiences. Nobody, really cared.
Yeah, that's unfortunate too, because there are a lot of players, owners, managers from that era, going all the way back to White, who played in the very first, what I consider to be Major League season in 1871 in the National Association, and Rupert, of course, goes through the 30s with the Yankees. So, but the 1930s are ancient history now, and they've pretty much exhausted the supply of players from Rupert's era who are going to go in the Hall of Fame. They've overdone it, I think, to a very large degree. There are a lot of very undeserving players from that era who, because they lived long enough and played with the right teams. Travis Jackson comes to mind as one. Lloyd Wainer is certainly, I think, another one. And but going back to O'Day's era, which actually encompassed the 1880s into the late 1920s and 30s, because O'Day not only was a player, a pitcher, and a pretty good one, but he also was a manager at one point of the Chicago Cubs, and he was a long-time umpire. And he was eventually selected for his umpiring, and I'm not convinced he was the best umpire from that era. Was not in the Hall of Fame, but he definitely, given his entire career and his participation in the Merkel incident in 1908, a very, very famous incident, of course. And he was the umpire who chose to call Merkel out in a force play, breaking with precedent, because previously umpires let the play go if it was a game-ending hit. O'Day made the right call and stood by it, and I think it probably had a lot to do with his eventual selection.
Well, it took the Hall of Fame over 100 years to put in William Hobart, who was the founder of the National League, and that in 1937 they had put in Morgan Bulkley, who was a figurehead president for the first year in 1876, and that was his only year as an executive in baseball. And he was put in 1937, and he later became United States Senator. But they put him in, and it took them also 100 years to put in the two prominent managers of the 1890s, Ned Hanlon and Frank Selig.
Exactly. Yeah, that was a shame. And there were a lot of players from the 80s and 90s who were at least marginal Hall of Famers, and several I think are, very well qualified, and probably will never get in. At least not in our lifetime, and who knows how long the Hall of Fame will go on, because it's now getting to a point where there are so many plaques. They're going to either have to build a new wing or make some rather dramatic changes in order to get everybody showing to the audience who's coming to the Hall of Fame. And it'll be interesting to see what happens to the Hall, because it's not one of the it generates a lot of income, but it's not really up to date. And I don't know about you, Al, but when was the first time you went to the Hall of Fame?
Oh, I went. My parents drove me up for my 15th birthday in 1958, but then again, I never got up there to see it again until 1982.
Well, you went earlier than I did, and I wonder, what did you think of it when you first saw it?
Well, I was 15 years old at the time. And obviously, you have to see the plaques that I've only saw pictures of in the first Tuck and Thompson encyclopedia, to see all the plaques and for Ruth and Cobb and Wagner and Walter Johnson and all the players from that particular era. And it was something that because there was no television, there was no anything back then. It was something that I wanted to see very, very much. I was very excited.
Yeah, I unfortunately didn't make it. I think 1980 was the first time I went, and I do remember that there was a rather fairly large wing devoted to the 19th century. And for those who are going to the Hall of Fame for the first time in the next year or two, one of the first things I think they're going to notice is that the 19th century is given very light treatment in the Hall of Fame. And many of the exhibits that were on display, gloves, bats, catcher's mat, rudimentary catcher's masks, catcher's gear, all the, shin guards and chest protectors. All that stuff's been removed now for the most part, and it's now lurking somewhere in the catacombs in the Hall of Fame. And you really need almost a special permission in order to get back into those, the depths of the hall to see what some of the stuff is in storage, and that stuff is really, for those like you and me, Al, that some of that stuff is really probably the most, the fun stuff for us to see.
From what I understand, they have a incredible backlog of items that that are just buried in their basement, and it would take quite a long time to get it out or expand. Of course, the whole thing of the whole thing being in Cooperstown is mythological anyway. But once the whole Doubleday story was discontinued, and they decided that Cooperstown was a nice bucolic place to have it. So there was absolutely no reason to move it to a more accessible place like the basketball, football, and the hockey Hall of Fames are.
Yeah, and Cooperstown is a nice little town, and it's certainly worth the trip. But you're right; it's difficult to get to. Accommodations in the summertime, in particular, and on the Hall of Fame, weekend, especially, are minimal. It's very, very hard to get reservations, and it's pretty tight there. Traffic can get very, very heavy during.
We had a group that used to go up basically in the 1990s, and a bunch of us from here, about a dozen of us, would go up the weekend after the induction ceremonies, and we stayed in the same place all the time, Cliff Inn, and stayed up there for 3 or 4 days. But going up there on an induction weekend, it was very, very difficult. It also became more accessible when they opened Interstate 88, which cuts off from the thruway and cuts directly to Oneonta, which is 20 miles south of Cooperstown. Prior to that, you had to go all the way up to the bend in the thruway and come down basically in one lane driving from Utica.
Yeah, it was that way.
It was until they Route 88 was open, Interstate 88 was open. It was very, very difficult to get up there and back if you're coming from any sort of distance.
Yeah, that was certainly true the first time I went. I remember it took us quite a while to make the drive.
Yeah. Also, one of the things is Baseball Hall of Fame is the only one that of the 4 major sports that people really get very, very passionate about. And we went through a whole group of us went through a whole series of meetings 25 years ago, deciding who should be kept in and who should be thrown out. And as you alluded to before, many of the players that were put in by the Veterans Committee, by Frankie Frisch and Charlie Gehringer, were people who had no reason for being in there. In fact, there's a guy, Gary Rector, who posts on the Hall of Fame site on Facebook, and he puts up birthdays of Hall of Famers. He puts up pictures of them. Last year, he put up a picture of Jesse Haynes, who was a Cardinal pitcher who took 18 seasons to win 210 games. And I posted that the only way this guy should be in the Hall of Fame was if he bought a ticket. And the post was pulled. The post was pulled.
Yeah.
He told me in no uncertain times he didn't want any negative posts up there. But
oh boy, yeah, Jesse Haynes. Wow. Yeah.
And
what did you think of the selections yesterday?
Okay, I was hoping Vlad Guerrero would get in. I knew that Bagwell and Raines would get in. I had no problems with them. One of the things that I did last night after they admitted Pudge Rodriguez is I looked up his numbers on baseballreference.com, and the catcher that he was compared similarly to offensively was Ted Simmons, who was an excellent catcher basically for the Cardinals and the Brewers, but has never, as far as I know, gotten any consideration for the Hall of Fame.
I know. Yeah, it is odd, but I suppose part of the reason is because he did end up playing. He played first base, didn't he? Did he even? I think he probably.
Yeah.
He DH for a while with the Brewers, I believe, didn't he?
Yeah.
And so that's probably been held against him. And probably the most strongest thing held against him is that his best years were early in his career. Pretty big things were expected of him. But by the time he reached his middle 20s, he pretty well peaked. In fact, I think his top season came when he was about 25, 26, with the 75 Cardinals. And,
also, sometimes getting in on the first ballot. I mean, I loved Willie Stargell as a player. And he was elected his first year on that he was eligible. But Willie Stargell, as much as I liked him, was not a player that you put in the pantheon of greats. I mean, he was very good, but he's not in the class with Ruth or Williams or Mantle or Wagner or any of those people. And so in first balloting, and you have these people out there, these writers out there who wouldn't vote for certain players who were eligible for the first time because they didn't want to give any newcomer, no matter how deserving he was, 100%.
Why do you think
ridiculous?
Why do you think Stargell made it in the first ballot?
He made it the first ballot because there was essentially no competition.
What year did he go in?
I think his last year was 1982, so he probably was elected in 1988.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point because hitting was pretty well depressed from the mid 60s on through the 70s, and so he actually, even though his numbers were very good, they were never really that great, but he did stand out because
he did. I'm not saying that he didn't, but
no, he did. I mean, but they weren't. You're right. They weren't Hall of Fame. In a normal season, they would not be considered, Hall of Fame caliber numbers, particularly not in the first ballot, and maybe not even in the first 4 or 5 years of eligibility.
Well, there are a lot of hitters I can name. Right off the top of my head, I can name Tony Oliva, Veda Pinson, and Al Oliver, to name 3, who were very, very hurt by peaking in the dead ball 2 years from 1963 through 1968.
Yeah.
And
Oliva in particular, and injuries did him in. He ended up being a DH, but I think it's really an injustice that he's never gotten full Hall of Fame consideration, because he was, I remember seeing him, and this guy, in batting practice, I used to watch him in batting practice. I used to like to watch.
Oh, I love watching him hit.
Yeah, I loved it too. He was really exceptional. But
the thing is, when you look at players like Billy Williams and some of the others that were regulars during that the 6-year period that they made it, even though their numbers were dragged down by the fact that the game was so heavily weighted in favor of the pitchers in that era.
Yeah, Williams played he had a long career, mostly with the Cubs, and I think he got extra credit for being a Cub, actually, because he never was on a pennant winner. In some cases, I always thought, Ted Lyons got extra credit for never being on a pennant with the White Sox.
Oh, he was with some pretty bad teams then.
Yeah, he was with bad teams.
Yeah.
He had some good seasons, but he had a long career. But was he really a better pitcher than Mel Harder? Was he really better than even Wes Farrell? Had a short career, a relatively short career, but our good friend Dick Thompson made an excellent case in his book on Wes Farrell that Farrell was probably the premier pitcher in the early 1930s, even more so than Lefty Grove. And here's a guy, and he was also a very good hitter, could play the outfield on occasion.
A lot of people say that the wrong Farrell was in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if you look at Rick Farrell's numbers, there's no way that he should even be in there, and he was put in there by Gehringer.
Yeah.
And,
a long
also,
career.
I know one of your pet peeves is the 19th Century American Association, and I think probably there are very, very few, if any, that played maybe Bid McPhee.
But Bid McPhee also played in the National League.
Yeah.
McPhee had 10 seasons as a National Leaguer. The Cincinnati moved from the American Association to the National League
A pure
in 1890,
American Association,
and
there aren't any.
Through the 99 season.
Yeah, pure American Association, there aren't any as far as I know.
There are none who really played the balance of their career in the American Association. You're right. Tim Keefe played several years in the association. Tommy McCarthy did. And whether McCarthy's a Hall of Famer is altogether another question. But he is in the Hall of Fame. And but there are none. And certainly Pete Browning, who terrorized pitchers in the American Association. And then when he left the American Association, went to the Players League in 1890, he led the Players League in batting. And then still had a couple good seasons left him when he came to the National League after the 1890 season. So there's a guy who, on his hitting alone, and he was a much better fielder than people generally credit him with being.
On the 19th Century Sabre Committee, when they always put out a who you think should be in the Hall of Fame list that aren't in, the number one that I always put down is Bob Carruthers.
Yeah, Carruthers is another one. Yeah, tremendous, excellent pitcher, good all-around ball player. Early in his career, he was a good hitter. Played the outfield on days when he wasn't pitching, and really a fine ball player. But he had a short career. I mean, he had Carruthers was one of the pitchers who there's only several pitchers who won 200 games before they were 30 and never won another game after that. And Carruthers was one of them, and there's only one who's ever made the Hall of Fame, and that was Amos Russi. He never won after he turned 29 either.
No, he was finished when the Giants sent him to Cincinnati for Christy Mathewson.
Yeah, he'd already been out. He'd sat out a couple seasons as a holdout.
Yeah, he held out. I think it was 1896. He held out over $200.
Yeah.
Which Friedman was running the Giants at the time, and Andrew Friedman was an early version of Steinbrenner with his constant firings. And I told people the reason he didn't fire pitching coaches the way Steinbrenner did is because they didn't have any.
Yeah. No, but Friedman was one of a kind. Boy,
the ones that I would like to see from the 50s, I'd like to see Gil Hodges. And even though Hodges' numbers weren't all that great, but by the standard of first baseman in the 1950s, if you don't include Stan Musial, Hodges was the best performing first baseman over the whole decade. His top years were not equal to Ted Kluszewski's top years, but Kluszewski only had 4 where he really hit for average and power, and then like Don Mattingly, his back did him in.
Yeah.
And the other one, in fact, I posted this on Facebook today, that anytime anybody puts up a picture of Minnie Minoso, I put down that he should be in the Hall of Fame because I think he's extremely underrated, and his contributions to the game as being the first black Latin superstar 4 years prior to Clemente, and the fact that he was such a good ambassador to the game after he retired, that he should have been, to me, a no-brainer.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's always a pleasure to play.
And for that era, they're not going to vote on anybody from that era until 2020. What do you think of these special committees that they set up now? The one that put in Selig and Shorholtz, and the other one that they had a couple of years ago that put in Joe Gordon. You think that they serve a purpose, or it's just
well, they certainly rankled me. When the strike year occurred in '94, and at the end of it, I never had the same taste for baseball again. And when the strike was finally settled, I said to myself, there were two people who really never should be in the Hall of Fame under any circumstances, Bud Selig and Donald Fair. And Selig is now in, and I think Fair is probably going to follow him in a few years.
No, they're not going. They'll play him Miller before they put Fair in. I think the mold was broken. Well, you could say go all the way back to Ford Frick, who's famous for saying when he was commissioner it was a league matter, and leaving the National League to Walter O'Malley and the American League to the Yankee owners, Dan Topping and Del Webb. And then, of course, you got they put in Bowie Kuhn, and to me that was the significant lowering of the bar. And apparently, all you have to do as commissioner to get in there is to be around long enough.
Exactly. Yeah, and Fay Vincent, who was a very qualified man, and for that matter, so was Bart Giamatti, whose career was cut very short because of his early death.
The only one that didn't serve any time really serve any real length of time that's in there as a commissioner is Happy Chandler.
Yeah, but Chandler was commissioner when the color line was broken permanently in 1947, and the game after when the game came back from World War II, it was a great era, the late 40s and early 50s, and he just happened to be sitting in office at the time, more by good fortune than anything else, because he was certainly not a great baseball man, and I don't know of any very significant decisions he made as a commissioner that
they threw him out in 1951. They voted him out, and then they brought in Ford Frick, who was much more compliant to the owner's wishes.
Yeah.
And the commissioner, people should understand. I don't know if they fully do that. The commissioner is an appointee of the owners, and the owners gave away all their powers to Judge Landis because they were in a position where they had to do that. And they've made sure that ever since Landis passed away, that any new commissioner would have to basically toe the line to what they wanted.
Yeah, and those like Fay Vincent who didn't and ended up with very short.
I know there's quite a number of people I know that are vehemently opposed to putting in Marvin Miller or Donald Fair or any labor personnel because of what's happened to the game since free agency was ended.
Well, I'm afraid Fair is going to get in. I mean, I think Miller deserves to. Miller should have been in a long time ago. He was a very bitter man, and toward the end of his life, and justifiably so, because
I was in one of the SABR meetings. I think it was in Cincinnati in 2004, and Miller was the guest speaker at the banquet, and he was going through all the war stories, and he was very, very serious. And somebody else from the audience had him, "Hey, Marvin, cool it a little bit. You won."
Yeah.
But he had obviously a really, really incredibly tremendous impact on the game, and these guys now wouldn't be making the kind of money that they're making. The players if it wasn't for him, and Kurt fled before him, and I think he definitely belongs in there.
Yeah.
But, in the next couple of years, you do have a couple of no-brainers coming up. After in 2019, you have Mariano Rivera being eligible for the first time, and in 2020, you have Derek Jeter being eligible for the first time.
Now, you really think Jeter is a first ballot Hall of Famer?
Oh, very definitely.
Why?
Why? Because he played on a number of world champions, played on the same team his whole career, and he got almost 3,500 hits. And
he was never the best player in that team. He was never the best shortstop in the American League.
But it's longevity. Yeah.
But you're giving him credit for longevity,
it's what I call the Eddie Murray syndrome.
Well, and Murray's another leading example of exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, they're compilers, and the Hall of Famers always preferred compilers rather than people who fade out very fast. People have asked me about Rocky Colavito, and asked me about some other guys who have fallen off the table very quickly at the end of their careers. And that's why I was surprised when Jim Rice was voted in, because he fell off very, very quickly. And, they prefer the Murrays and the Biggios and these guys that pile up,
there's certain
without, because they're steady and there's no real, Eddie Murray hit 500 home runs without ever hitting 133 in a season.
Yeah.
But they love these, for some reason they love these types, and Jeter, to me, is better than average. But Jeter, because he's a Yankee, because he has this clean-cut image, because he compiled a lot of numbers, played on a number of world champions, will be a first ballot no-brainer.
Well, if you were building a contender, and you had a choice of either one in their prime, would you take Jeter or Omar Vizquel?
Well, that's a very, very tough question. Vizquel was a tremendous fielder. He was not, I think he was a bit better offensively than Louis Aparicio or Ozzie Smith, but he's in that kind of ballpark. It's a very, very tough call.
It is a tough call. It is. And Vizquel at best will be a marginal Hall of Famer. And
one of the problems, and I pointed this out, quite a while back, is that he has flown so far under the radar that he's probably not really, really appreciated by people who didn't see him a lot. He wasn't a big power hitter, and he played in markets that were not exactly media hubs.
No, they weren't.
So,
but he had a long career, and wherever he went,
he's going to be eligible next year.
I know.
It'll be interesting to see how he does on the first ballot.
It will be. Yeah, I agree with you about Chipper Jones, that he's going to get in.
And
but another you mentioned, and that certainly questionable, is Jim Thome. Thome, had a murderous swing, really tremendous power, long career, hit well over 500 home runs, good eye at the plate, but not a great fielder by any means, not a great base runner, and people have always wondered. He flew under the radar too. I think as far as steroids go, I couldn't see him lasting as long as he did and producing the numbers he did for as long as he did, without having a little extra juice in it.
Well, it helps if you don't have to play the field. And that's the next question I want to get to, because I think the whole DH issue is going to come to a head when David Ortiz becomes eligible. And I know there's been a lot of people who believe that Edgar Martinez belongs in. And what's your take on, whether DHs belong or not?
I don't think Ortiz does. Ortiz just didn't play enough years in the field. He was terrible, and when he did, he was no help in the field. Martinez, I think, injuries curtailed his career. Now, Martinez, I think, could, if DH hadn't existed, could have continued to play in the field for a few more years, and probably long enough so that we wouldn't be even arguing the point right now. But in Ortiz's case, he just was not capable of playing the field and being anything but a detriment.
Well, the only time he really played in the field during his whole stint was the Red Sox, was when they played interleague games on the road.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know I think one or two World Series games he played in. He played first base when they were playing the Cardinals in 2013, and probably when they were playing the Rockies in 2007.
Yeah.
But, another thing I'd like to ask you, I know there's been some pushback on Larry Walker, but in a year or two, Todd Helton will be eligible for the Hall of Fame, and he played his whole career and with the Rockies, which of course, as most people know, is a heaven for hitters. And his skewed numbers will have any effect on the way he's looked.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's going to be viewed much the same way that Chuck Klein was viewed. Klein had, but Klein, in Klein's defense, he was never the same player after he really tore his hamstring up his first year with the Cubs, tried to play through it, and ended up pretty much wrecking himself. He never had the same mobility. He was a good fielder early in his career, played right in the Baker Bowl very well, and he was a good base runner too. But that all went after that hamstring injury, and in his first year with the Cubs at 34. But Klein is considered, a fluke product of the Baker Bowl, and justifiably so for the most part, because when he really, his home road figures, were pretty one-sided. And in Helton's case, I don't know. Have you ever seen his road figures?
No, I haven't. But I'm sure when he becomes eligible, that's going to be made very, very public.
I think so too. Yeah. I don't know what's going to happen. I kind of doubt that he's ever going to make it. I do, because he played this entire. He just those years they were
one
good.
of the things that's trending now is because there's so much movement. There are certain players that one that's going to be eligible in several years is Carlos Beltran, who's bounced from team to team for contracts. So I think that they're going to look favorably on players who spend their whole careers with one team, because there aren't that many of them anymore.
Yeah, well, they always have to a certain extent. Like Luke Appling, and we talked about Lyons, and the guys never were on a pennant winner. Luke Appling was a good ball player. I don't think he was ever the best shortstop in the American League. He had good batting averages, but he wasn't a great fielder, and didn't have much power. And but that
ballpark was very hard to have power.
Yeah, it was hard, but he played on the road, and he was that master of hitting a foul ball. I remember I saw him as a kid, and I was told, that watch this guy, he'll hit like 8 or 9 foul balls in a bat, and lo and behold, he did it, and he's incredible. He's a really, really excellent contact hitter. Very, very hard to speak out.
And one other issue I want to address before we sign off. There are certain players that I think, to me, Dominic DiMaggio is the leading example of players who had very, very good careers but lost time right would have been their peak to service in the military during World War II.
DiMaggio was one.
The Cecil Travis. There aren't really that many, but there are a few of them that might have compiled enough credentials to get in had they had careers that were not interrupted by military service.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And I was, and when they had the Sabre Convention in Louisville in 1997, one of the people there was Mel Parnell. And I asked Mel Parnell about Dominic DiMaggio, who I really never saw play. And that was the year that I think that was the year or a year or two after that the Veterans Committee elected Richie Ashburn. And he went off on a tirade how Dominic DiMaggio was so much better than Ashburn it wasn't funny. And he was very, very upset that Don DiMaggio had never gotten the recognition. But
yeah, he played in the shadow of Williams, and of course his brother.
Yeah.
And, you're right. You're right. He's almost a forgotten name today. I mean, but he did have, he was a very key figure on those Red Sox teams in the late 40s. And had they won the 48 and 49 pennant, I think, his argument for being in the Hall of Fame would have been much stronger. But he was on the 46 team, but that was it. And Pesky's another one who had
Pesky lost 3 years.
3 years. He started off like a house of fire early in his career. He's over 200 hits every year, hitting in the 330s, and he came back from the war and he had a couple good years, but then he went into a tailspin shortly after that, and never his length of his career was very much against him.
Yeah, he's another one that went downhill very rapidly after 1951.
Yeah, he did. But all those Red Sox, Vern Stevens, they were all still fairly young, and even Dom DiMaggio wasn't that old.
Bobby Dorr had to quit because of a bat, but he's in. Bobby Dorr.
But he got in. Yeah. And I don't know that Dorr was a better ball player than Dom DiMaggio. I would say that two of them are pretty much equal, as far as their contributions to that club.
Anyway, to do a coda on this program, what do you think they have to do to improve, or what would you recommend to them to improve the selection committee and how it's operating these days, and again, what they should do with the museum to make it more historical to people? I know they're trying. The whole idea there is to make money, and the more they cater to the modern game, because you're getting a lot of people now who never saw Johnny Bench or Tom Seaver or George Brett or Mike Schmidt play.
Yeah.
And
let's see, the Hall of Fame itself ever being a more appealing place than it is now, and it's certainly a less appealing place, at least to me, and I think you indicated maybe that to you too, than the Hall of Fame you saw when the first few times you went. But as far as getting in some of the older players and some of the 19th century figures in particular, something's got to be done. And obviously there's not going to be anyone around who saw them play or saw clips of them or anything like that, or talked to anyone who played against them. So it's really got to be given over to historians and researchers who really know what these guys did, how they did it, what kind of teams they played for, and the obstacles that they faced. It's got to be, and it's a tough evaluation, but there are people, we talked about Browning. Browning's certainly one case. Harry Stovey is another interesting case. And Carruthers, as you said, is very valid, is a very valid argument for the Hall of Fame. But, we hope we can see, some effort being made to get historians and researchers more involved in the selection and giving them more credence.
I'm on Facebook. I'm on a Gil Hodges Belongs in the Hall of Fame site. There are 2,000 members. And one of the people that run the site sent a letter to the Hall of Fame that there are 2,000 members who are ready to sign a petition to get Gil Hodges in the Hall of Fame. And they received a letter back from the Hall of Fame saying, well, the next time that era comes up, the Veterans Committee will be 2020, and basically they're saying, the heck with you and your petitions.
Yeah, well, it's too bad. But one of the strongest arguments that I can make for Hodges, he was a good player, and I agree with it. But his career wasn't really that long. But the taking the Mets to the World Championship in '69 was, I think, one of the most fantastic
incredible feats of managing.
Yeah, it was. and it's just too bad that he died so shortly after that. But he could have possibly been a great manager.
Yeah, well, Tom Seaver swears by him.
Yeah,
and he did come there when the whole culture was one of losing, and he turned it around fairly quickly. Anyway, we're coming to the end of the session. David, I want to thank you for your participation in this show.
Well, thank you, Alan. It's been really enjoyable to be with you.
Okay, and we'll be back next week, same bat time, same bat channel. Good night, everyone.